Welcome to Investing Insights. I'm Sarah Hansen, filling in for Ivana Hampton today. Quantum computing stocks have surged in popularity over the past year, capturing investors' enthusiasm on the coattails of the artificial intelligence boom. Quantum computing technology promises to be one of the most transformative developments of the next few decades. But are investors getting out over their skis? Morningstar's analysts view quantum technology as promising, but caution that it's not quite ready for the mainstream. Here to walk us through the landscape and the best way for investors to get some early exposure in their portfolios is Dan Romanoff, a senior equity research analyst on the technology team at Morningstar. So Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Great. So we are talking about quantum computing today, which has really captured people's attention. It's also, I think, maybe pretty opaque for a lot of people, including me. So could you walk us through, what is quantum computing? Why is it unique? Why are investors talking about it? Why is it promising?
Sure. And it's pretty opaque for me, too. I got to tell you, the physics here are
Yeah.
very complicated. So it was a learning experience for sure. And so I would say, in a nutshell, what it is, it's a totally different way to do the compute function. So we're used to this binary world, 1 and 0, voltage flowing through a transistor, 1, 0 bits. That's sort of the binary world that exists. In quantum computing, we're doing something similar. We take a particle of some kind, say an atom, and we kind of observe it. What is the state of that atom? Is it in a state of excitation or not? And so that seems binary. It seems yes or no, but it gets weird because we use the fundamental properties within quantum mechanics to look at some special sort of areas, and that is particularly superposition and entanglement. So superposition says that atom is not just excited or not excited. It is both at the same time. And not only is it both, it's actually both and everything in between all at the same time. And so it just becomes this probability distribution of the state of excitation of the atom. And so that is kind of weird. And then beyond that, we take entanglement, which says basically if you take two particles, you make them interact, they will become entangled. And once they're entangled, as soon as you know something about the one particle, you automatically know something about the other particle without ever looking at it. And so those two things together allow you to take like a group of qubits, and it allows you to sort of observe all possible outcomes of a problem at the same time. And so it's a different way of computing. And instead of definitively saying 1 + 1 is 2, like you would get with an Intel processor, you get something that is 1 + 1 is probably 2. But it also could be 0. Just the probability of it being 0 is very low.
Okay.
And so that's sort of in a nutshell what it is. And hopefully that is sort of understandable. In terms of why is it exciting, I think the baseline here is that some of the computations that a quantum computer can do, they can do them exponentially faster than a classical computer can do it. And the reason for that is if you can kind of compute all possible outcomes of a problem at the same time, that's much faster than sort of processing so like one solution and determining if that's the one that you want to use, no, then you determine the next solution and maybe that's not the right one. And so that's just an exponential speed up. And so, everything in technology is faster is better. And so hence quantum computers are very exciting. So hopefully that gets at the question.
Absolutely. And so the question that I have for you next is, this technology we didn't just discover it, right? Scientists and researchers have been working on this for a very long time, but we saw, a lot of interest in the market, like within the past year, within the past 6 months about quantum. Why is that? Why did we see these stocks explode just recently?
Yeah, this is really what got me interested in the topic in the first place. And it goes back a little more than a year. So it was December of 2024, and Google announced their latest quantum processor. So they call it Willow, is the Willow quantum chip. And basically, they not only did they introduce the chip, but they said, oh, by the way, we produced this set of operations called random circuit sampling. It's basically a meaningless task that you would never do with a regular computer. But by the way, Willow did it in a few minutes. And if we sort of assigned the most powerful supercomputer in the world to do this same task, it would take 10 septillion years.
Oh
And
my
so,
gosh. So kind of a case study.
yeah, and so it's
Okay.
kind of a case study. And so the random circuit sample is first the chip simulates a quantum circuit, and then it reads the quantum circuit to make sure it's behaving in a quantum way. That's basically what it is. And so just to simulate a quantum circuit using a traditional chip, it's extremely difficult. And so therefore, all of the processing time. And so that was how it started. And then in short order, in January and February, you had both Amazon and Microsoft say, oh, by the way, here's Amazon, here's our Ocelot quantum chip. And then Microsoft said, oh, here's our Majorana 1 quantum chip. And all of a sudden, everyone's talking about quantum. And like it came out of nowhere. It's like there are these big companies, that are spending a lot of money. By the way, we have this super powerful sort of technology. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do with it yet. And so that got the world talking. And so then along the way, you do have 4 publicly traded companies here in the US, including like Rigetti, for example, D-Wave. And so those stocks started to run throughout the year and, sort of culminating in massive spikes over the summer,
Yeah.
such that it was sort of talked about at an NVIDIA conference. And Jensen Huang was sort of, poo-pooing quantum technology. And then he had to backtrack. And so it just kept adding more and more exposure to these names. And so people were looking at it more and more and sort of realizing the power, or what is being advertised as the promise of quantum computing. And so, one thing led to another. Those stocks all ran massively. And so, you had almost a meme stock sort of situation. But it brought a lot of attention to all of it. And by the way, since then, NVIDIA said, oh, well, we're working on quantum too now. And so
Right.
we're investing billions of dollars in it. And so like they're all of a sudden involved too. And so this is very real, but that's sort of
There's
how
some momentum as more and more firms talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is
Yes.
there, AI and quantum are not the same. We know, but was there, we saw some AI momentum over the summer. Investors got really interested in tech. Is that part of the momentum too? Kind of this enthusiasm for new technology, or is this happening on a totally different track?
Yeah, I think that it's almost the opposite. Like I think that quantum technology maybe would possibly be able to take off faster if everyone wasn't so worried about what's going on in AI. Because I think
see.
AI is more immediate and it's more pressing, right?
I
Like
see.
that is real and accessible today. And so therefore that's where like the enterprise dollars are flowing. But in terms of AI, like that's a use case that people think is like promising for quantum computing. We'll see about that. I think that's pretty advanced, but I guess I would say you never know. But I think there's lower hanging fruit for quantum technology. So
makes sense. Well, speaking of the lower hanging fruit, you mentioned the big firms, the Microsofts, the Alphabets, even NVIDIA is kind of dipping toes in. How ready is something like quantum for the mass market? How far are we from this becoming mainstream? And what are the challenges that it faced along the way?
It's fascinating because so it's important to note these machines exist today. They are performing computations today. And you can go rent time on an IBM quantum computer and actually, do some quantum computing today. And so there's a lot of challenges, though. And so if you're one of these like publicly traded companies who's trying to develop maybe your first quantum computer, the engineering challenges are pretty monumental. And so there is like a qubit, like the excited state of an atom exists for a fraction of a second. And so you basically have less than a second to make all of your computations, which is crazy in a nutshell. And so we need to extend the coherence time. And so that's one challenge. And the error rates tend to be very high because you're not measuring, it's like a very definitive thing. It's not 1 or 0. It's probably this. And in the case of probably this, it's hard to extract an answer out of there. And so the error correction needs to improve. And I would just famously say that we're kind of around like 99.9% fidelity right now, which seems great, right? You're like, that's basically 100%.
Yeah.
I would just remind you that, loosely, right, leading up into the internet bubble, I think it was, Intel had what was called a floating point error on whatever the current Pentium chip was at the time. And they recalled all of them. And they
Wow.
said, we're going to take a $500 million charge, which was a lot of money at the time. They recalled all those Pentium chips and they just, gave everyone a new chip basically. And the error rate on those was like 1 in 10 billion or
Oh my
whatever it
gosh.
was. And so we're at like 1 in 1,000. And so in order to get to 1 in 10 billion, like we've got a long way to go.
Significant technology hurdles
Yeah.
ahead. Okay.
And so we're improving on those sort of like almost on a weekly basis. I mean, the pace of innovation here is astounding, if you're following the stuff, and we were digging into it. And it's like every time we kind of wrote some pages, we're like, oh, this is irrelevant already. We need to sort of upgrade everything. So that was, I would say, fun and interesting. And so those are some of the challenges. And so no, we're not ready for this to be like adopted in any true sense by like everybody.
Okay.
It's kind of academic. It's kind of in like pilot programs. Like a use case for sure is going to be drug discovery. You can model very complex molecules and proteins. And if you're sort of using this like qubit approach to find like an optimal state of a protein or how a molecule will behave, the use case seems pretty easy. And so the involvement of those companies is pretty active right now. Like they're doing real world trials to see like how much will this improve, improve the time to market for a drug or whatever. And so that stuff is happening now, but there's just not enough capacity anyway, even if it was available to sort of, make it a reality. And so we kind of wrote in our paper that we're 5 to 10 years before the early stage of adoption starts. If you're Microsoft or Google, I think the CEOs were saying kind of like 5 years is when this all will start. We'll see if 5 years is the real thing. And we're not even saying 5 years, boom, it's everywhere. It's kind of like 5 years, we're going to start seeing a trickle in of like usable quantum computers. So that's kind of the way we see the industry evolving.
So a long runway.
Yes.
To put it to understate it maybe. But in that report that you're talking about, you mentioned that your team, your analysis, you say it's kind of at odds with the market's opinion on quantum. Not in a conflict way, but just maybe you have kind of a different view on it than the street does. You mentioned the timeline, you mentioned the market size. Can you walk us through kind of how your opinion, your outlook differs from some of the others on Wall Street?
Yeah. So let's go back like a couple of questions you were asking about, like why, like what drove the excitement. And I sort of mentioned, well, you had this run in the 4 publicly traded companies. Those 4 publicly traded companies effectively have zero revenue. They have tens of millions of dollars in revenue collectively. The market cap combined at the time we were writing this was more than $50 billion. And so and they're all losing money. So the multiple you described to that is massive. And that's not really what's happening in reality here. And so, I don't know, to see how long it's going to take. I think that is probably, where we are most at odds, just because those stocks running imply that investors were believing this technology is ready today, or it will be ready within the next, couple of quarters. And if that's the case, yeah, sure, the market is forward looking, and so you invest in front of that stuff. But that's not reality here. Like we kind of went through the timeline. I didn't mention this in the last question, but John Preskill is kind of like thought of as the father of quantum computing. He kind of says 10 to 20 years, he thinks, is when you'll see useful quantum computers. So there's a lot of opinions on that. And so, we're just looking at where the technology is. There's always early adopters. And so the technology is quite obviously real. Like there are machines, IBM has more than a dozen installed and operating. And so the tech is real and that's proven. It's not useful enough right now. And so that's a hurdle. And so that kind of gets the question to be more of one of timing than anything else. And so is it going to be ready in 1 year or 10 years? And so that is the big difference. We don't think it's ready now. And the stocks running right now suggests that people think it's ready, and it's just not.
There's a disconnect there between, Are there, one of the things I think you touch on in your research is there are kind of different technological approaches. How do those factor in to kind of that timeline, how investors are thinking about it, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So in this report, we kind of explored just the technology underpinnings, and there's like easily more than a dozen ways to sort of create a qubit. And so there's The one that most of these companies are using is superconducting, which basically you just are cooling some array of atoms to like basically absolute zero or just above it, and you're sort of measuring an excited state within there. To get something to be absolute zero is a technological hurdle of its own, and that's just one approach, right? And so that is complicated, and so there's other things we can do to create a qubit, and some of them are better understood, like nuclear magnetic imaging. So that's like an MRI machine. We've been doing that for decades. Like you can do it that way. You can do it with photons, which we do through optical networking. So there are different ways to do it. And they all have sort of pros and cons, right? Some of them make computations faster. Some of them have longer coherence time. Some of them have better error rates. And so as of now, none of these is like the superior approach. And so money is sort of funneling into all of the approaches at the same time. And so just for instance, Google uses superconducting. Microsoft uses something that is called a Majorana fermion, which they say creates a new state of matter. I'll tell you, there is a lot of debate in the physics community if that is true or not.
Okay.
And Amazon uses something that is different altogether. They call it a cat qubit, which is basically kind of like an oscillating charge. So it's kind of like a clock within a PC, like that oscillation that keeps the clock cycle. So if you have a 3 gigahertz processor, sort of a similar concept to that. And so there's a lot of different approaches. Some of them are easier and cheaper, and et cetera. And so there's not going to be one best approach, I don't think. It kind of will vary on use cases, especially early on, where you might say like superconducting is the most reliable, so general purpose-ish. And, I think it'll sort of cascade from there. So it's probably early to say definitively which ones are going to be the most used or whatever.
Makes sense. I wonder now if it's early to answer this next question, which is about the size of the market opportunity. It seems like we have unknowns on timing, kind of unknowns on technology, but everyone, I've seen some very big numbers floating around.
Yes.
How big are we talking? Like, how big could this be all the way down the road?
So we looked at this we were just trying to find estimates at first, like what do other people say? And so like, one number that we attached ourselves to and laughed about early on was, I'm not even going to name the consulting firm, but a very well-known consulting firm had a number that ended in trillion.
Oh.
And to me, that was pretty funny. Like, sure, maybe it's going to be a trillion, but let's get to a billion first or 100 million first. And so, saying it's going to be $1 trillion, I think is crazy and sort of based on nothing. So we did attempt to size what the market might be. And we kind of said at maturity, so we were loosely saying that's around 20 years. So it's big enough where the technology is proven, it's adopted in sort of a mass way. And what we came up with was this approach where we said the most likely use cases are going to be in the chemical industry and the pharmaceutical industry and like the route optimization delivery industries, financial industry, cybersecurity, just like cases where the technology is kind of obviously going to be in play. And we said, okay, what are the revenues those industries generate? And that number is about $36 trillion. Okay. And from there we said, and how much R&D do these companies spend? And the answer for pharmaceuticals is like 22% of revenue. The answer for specialty chemical companies is something like 6, 7, 8%. And so, we just basically take an average of that and say, okay, if these companies are all willing to spend loosely 50 basis points more on R&D, that gets you to a number that is around $200 billion. And so, and I talked to our internal analysts. I talked to Seth Goldstein. Are your specialty chemical companies willing to spend 50 basis points more to speed, new molecules, new molecule development? And he said, oh, absolutely. They're spending a ton of money now on AI. And so they are willing to invest in technology to sort of speed up time to market for new production if it will help sales growth. And so, and they say the same thing on the healthcare team with like pharma, obviously drug discovery, they spend a ton of money on that. So the answer seems to be that's at least a reasonable basis for a market size.
In the next 2 decades.
$200 billion in sort of like 20 to 30 years.
2 to 3 decades.
There's a lot of ifs in there.
Of course. Yeah, I think ifs with quantum technology is kind of the whole, isn't that the whole idea?
Right. It's all just a probability
Yeah,
distribution.
yeah. So you mentioned earlier that there are kind of 4 publicly traded quantum companies, that are exclusively quantum, and our analysts do not cover them, but you do talk about them in the report a little, and you suggest that for now, investors treat them with a little bit of caution. Why is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, for sure. So yes, we definitely don't cover them. So if compliance is listening, we don't cover these companies.
Mhm.
But we are investors here, and so we kind of understand how to analyze a company and determine if something may or may not be a good investment. And so, I would just break it down in pretty simple, high level things like the revenues are almost non-existent. The technology for them is largely unproven. A couple of those companies actually have delivered at least one system. None of them are profitable. None of them are producing any free cash flow, and so they're bleeding cash. And they'll all have to access the capital markets at some point in the near future to like keep funding going. And
Mm.
so there's a lot of negatives there. And by the way, the collective market cap's already $50 billion, and so there's a lot of expectations baked into that, and there's a lot of risks, I would say, obviously. And so that's our position, is to not tread in that uncharted water.
Yeah, yeah. What I'm hearing is that it's very early.
Very,
Like,
very early,
okay.
yes. And there's going to be, as far as I can tell, there's going to be probably at least one, if not two, IPOs this year in
Mm.
2026 for additional quantum computing companies. So it's going to be the Wild West out there.
Yeah. Is it too much the Wild West right now to identify kind of winners and losers like today, 2026?
Well, so we looked at, we researched this for like 6 months, and we came across easily 100, if not 150 companies that are involved in quantum computing. In the report, I think we cover probably 10 or 15 sort of privately held names now. And some of
Mm.
them we just came across over and over and over. And you get the sense like, okay, this technology is maybe ahead of someone else's. And so therefore we gave them, a half a page basically. And I would say that if there's 150 companies, the industry can't support 150 companies. Like there are no industries with 150 suppliers of one particular product. And so obviously consolidation would need to happen, or most of them are just going to fail. And so there's a lot of VC money pouring into this, a few $1 billion a year. I'm sure that will accelerate over the next couple of years. And then you have, I don't know, nation states investing billions
Yeah.
of dollars. And by the way, you still have Google and Amazon and these guys with long-term, R&D projects, and they've already invested lots of money, and they have all the time in the world until this
Well, the
sort
cash,
of,
I
yeah.
imagine too, right?
Yeah, and so the leader today, quite obviously, is IBM. Like they have the most installations. They have generated 36 million with an M, $1 million a quarter in like bookings, and so that's loosely $1 billion cumulatively over the course of several years now. But that's today. And sort of from a technology standpoint, there are others that look promising, but then you have Microsoft with,
Mm.
$100 billion of free cash flow a year. And this is a 20-year project for them already. And like they just have an unlimited capacity to fund this for as long as they need to, with as much money as they want for as long as possible. And so I think those guys ultimately will be pretty well positioned overall.
And those guys, you mean the big tech
Yeah,
firms.
the cloud service providers, the Microsofts and Amazons of the world. And so picking an exact winner, you can clearly say IBM is the leader right now, and some of these private companies might be okay, but there's definitely going to be a shakeout. And I wouldn't want to just buy like one company and say, here's my quantum computing investment, and I'm going
Mm.
to, get rich because of this.
I see. So for investors who are saying, I want to get in on the ground floor, I'm super excited about this. Tech investing is the way to go. How are you thinking about getting some exposure in a portfolio now? Is it those big firms or is it?
Yeah. So again, don't cover the small ones. I would be real cautious on those. And so if
Mm.
you wanted exposure, the obvious paths are through IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and there's probably some other there's definitely some Japanese companies, some of those conglomerates over there that have a good like quantum division. And so you can get exposure there. Like Microsoft, for example, has a quantum business unit within Azure. And so it's like called Microsoft Azure Quantum. And there's like a menu of services that you can sort of already access there. And so you can sort of develop your own quantum algorithms. You can get access to like a Rigetti or other sort of quantum computers. And you could sort of run test programs on the algorithms you've written, see if they actually work the way they should. And so that's sort of the state of the industry right now. And on top of that, Microsoft, of course, is investing in its own chip. And so it's easy to see that in 5 years or 10 years, this whole industry is just cloud computing, right? And so there's just a data center with a bunch of, Intel-based servers and then a bunch of NVIDIA-based servers. And then over in this corner, we have, like a few quantum computers that are just being outsourced, and basically everyone's renting them in like an infrastructure model that exists today. And so
they're folded in kind of
yeah.
to the business model.
And so if you already own Microsoft or Google, if quantum computing takes off, then you're going to have exposure automatically. And it's going to be small, obviously, but that's the way I would think of it. And so well, I hope that gets at the heart of your question.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm thinking of this phrase you used in the report. You described quantum computing as kind of a call option, is the phrase that you used, which is, an investing 101 term. But can you tell us what you mean by that? Because I thought it was a good way to describe it.
Yeah. So if I buy Microsoft today, just as an investor, I'm like, well, they have Office and they have a monopoly in Windows and they have Azure. And so you're kind of building out a model you're going to generate this much in revenues and margins are going to be this. And you're sort of basing that on products as they are today and, perhaps improvements that'll be made over the next few years. So if you own Microsoft, they're investing in quantum right now. And as an investor, I'm ascribing zero revenue and zero, sort of operating profit dollars to anything quantum computing related. But in 5 or 10 years, if there's revenue streams here, you're going to get them. And so you have this optionality that you're not really thinking about by owning Alphabet or Amazon or Microsoft today. And so when I said call option, that's kind of what I meant. It's, it's there and you're not even really paying for it. It's sort of free baked into, the shares that you already hold.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Great. And to wrap us up, I know this was a lot, and I'm really impressed that you had all of the kind of technology at your fingers, all the tech know-how. But for investors thinking about quantum computing right now, and it's such a buzzy thing. We mentioned it's kind of opaque. We mentioned there's been a lot of interest with maybe not a lot of fundamentals to go along with that interest. What's the most important thing for an investor to know right now who's seeing maybe headlines, who's seeing exciting YouTube videos with flames on the bottom and, the green line going to infinity? Like, what should you know about this?
Yeah. Well, if you have any good videos like that, let me know. I want to invest.
Yeah.
But in reality, I would say if you are thinking that you want some sort of near-term, immediate return from investing in some hot quantum stock, I don't think that is reality. Maybe the meme nature of some of those certainly can artificially pump up the price, and maybe you can do great, but it won't be based on any fundamentals, I don't think. And so you need to be patient and be investing for the long term if you want to do anything in quantum right now. But you should keep in the back of your mind also that this probably is going to be real and pretty meaningful eventually. And so that eventually is really the key word there.
Right. Makes total sense. Well, Dan, thank you so much for walking us through this. This was great.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thanks for making this show part of your day. A couple reminders. You can give Investing Insights 5 stars on Apple Podcasts to help others find the work we're producing for you. And subscribe to Morningstar's YouTube channel to watch new videos from our team. Thanks to senior video producer Jake Van Kersen and associate multimedia editor Jessica Bevel. I'm Sarah Hansen, senior markets reporter for Morningstar. Thanks for tuning in.